Good afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever in the world you are. Welcome. I have Ted and Andrea Lemon with me. They'll keep me on track. Actually, nobody can do that, but
we'll do our best.
They'll do their best. Yeah. All right. So, welcome to the Patreon Q&A. I think I'm going to use the same strategy that I have the last couple of times. I'll answer the questions of people that are here first, and then take up questions of people that aren't here. You need some ways to make a note of the people that we've skipped as I go through the list, because the list is fairly long.
Yes, I've mixed it now.
Oh, I can pull up the Patreon.
Okay. All right.
Nick is here now, too. Nick Van Cleek is behind you as well.
Oh, hi, Nick. Good. You snuck in while I was busy trying to figure things out here.
You're going to go sit on the couch?
Yeah.
All right. So let's begin. We have quite a few questions, and I was looking over them earlier, and I'm going to be answering a lot of them here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Thomas. That's background noise and. Yeah. I'm going to mute you for the time being, Thomas. All right, is John Bash here yet? No John Bash. Well, I'm looking forward to answering John's question, so hopefully he'll show up. No, actually, he said he might not. He said in his comment that he might not. Okay. Hassan. Is Hassan here? I don't see Hassan. All right. Chris Scott. Oops. Chris here. Well, you know what? I'm going to answer Chris's question anyway, because it's some things that I would, I'd be quite happy to bring you up to date on. Okay. Chris asks, how is my health? And what can you tell us about your work on your upcoming book on the changes to the Stronghold and the integration with TCMC? For those of you who don't know, TCMC is Tucson Community Meditation Center, and Stronghold is Cochise Stronghold Retreat Center that Nancy and I operate in southeast Arizona. So, how is my health? Well, I have stage 4 lung cancer that is responding extremely well to a new drug called Tagrisso. Previous CAT scans have shown no growth in any of the metastases and some shrinkage in one of them. And I have another CT scan coming up sometime in the next couple of weeks. So on that front, things are well. I have an unhealed incision from a surgery I had February 6th. Cancer and various other things were interfering with that, a MRSA infection, and so forth. And the good news on that is that it's finally healing. Yesterday, it had made such a remarkable change that the people in the wound care center were, the nurse practitioner was doing a victory dance and waving arms in the air. And one of the nurses said, I've never seen so much change so quickly. Now, just to let you know, Andrea has been doing a kind of healing method, energetic healing method, that she learned from Bill Bengston, Bengston. And Bill Bengston's story is really amazing. So I recommend that you all have a look. Look up Bill Bengston and look at some of his TED Talks and YouTubes. It's rather amazing. But anyway, that seems to contributed, I think, greatly to the healing of the incision. Other than that, I think I'm doing pretty well. A little bit subject to fatigue, which, considering the things that have been going on, isn't a surprise, but getting better all the time. As for work on the upcoming book, well, that's there's less writing being done than I would like, but it's actually, I think, beneficial because there's because of what I want to achieve with it. I want to reach a very wide audience who might be put off by something that is too Buddhist or even particularly recognizable as Buddhist. So I'm trying to put it together in such a way that won't put people off. I want to reach as many people as I can with it. And it's coming clearer and clearer in my mind just how to do that, how to frame it. So I would say, considering what's going on, the book is progressing nicely. The reason it's not progressing more rapidly has to do with the next part of the question. Was Chris was asking about the changes to Cochise Stronghold Retreat. Well, due to a donation, Dharma Treasure is taking over Cochise Stronghold Retreat. We will be operating as a retreat center primarily for people on solo retreat. We'll probably do about 4 group retreats a year. And our niche as a retreat center will be one for small, intensive group retreats of 15 to 20 people. And what we would like to see is something like 5 to 8 people on solo retreat going forward. Over the last couple of years of doing solo retreats, probably I should say about the last 4 or 5 years, we've had people do retreats everywhere from a few days to more than a year. Had one person do an 8-month retreat. Several people do 5 or 6 months retreat. Lots of people do 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 month retreats. And we'd like to see more of that. We have a resident teacher program. So each month there will be a different teacher here. The majority of them will be teachers that I have trained in the Dharma Treasure teacher training courses. But for the month of September, we have Daniel Ingram as a resident teacher. And the resident teachers will assist me in doing meditation interviews. Once the transition has completed and we found somebody to be on site and run the retreat center, Nancy and I will be free to do other things. Of course, I'll be free to work on the book more and spend more time in teaching. Nancy will have more time to go to Canada and visit kids and grandkids. Well, I'll be doing that as well, but probably not till the 2 weeks she is. I plan on being here on about a weekly basis, and here for longer periods when we have things going on that are appropriate to that. So this is a big transition. There's a lot involved in transferring property into a nonprofit. And the biggest, and this is something, I'm glad I have this opportunity to put it out to all of you. The biggest thing that needs to happen right now is to find a person, or preferably a couple, who would love to live in the most exquisitely beautiful wilderness area and operate a retreat center on a day-to-day basis. And I know somewhere out there is that person or that couple who this is their dream, and they're going to show up and they're going to come and they're going to move in here, and they're going to start doing all the work that Nancy and I have to do now. But until that happens, and until that happens, things won't look much different than they have for the last few years. So, and we'll continue to be taking solo retreats and making arrangements for group retreats, etc. And then I think there's one more part to Chris's question. The integration with Tucson Community Meditation Center. Well, I'm not sure what Chris is thinking of or referring to in that. There's an ongoing involvement of Dharma Treasure teachers with the Tucson Community Meditation Center, and with more time freed up for myself. And I do have a little co-op condo in Tucson now. I may have more personal involvement with Tucson Community Meditation Center. That's all up in the air. It's things to be happening in the future. But our relationship with TCMC will continue. Well, actually, one connection that we have with TCMC that's very good is that Blake Barton, who is the executive director of TCMC, is also the interim executive director of Dharma Treasure at the moment during this transition. So that's kind of what's going on with me, Nancy, and Dharma Treasure and Cochise Stronghold Retreat. In the future, it will be Dharma Treasure Retreat at Cochise Stronghold. So we keep the branding of Cochise Stronghold, but it becomes identified as Dharma Treasure Retreat. That may be more than you wanted to know, but Chris asked and I wanted to tell you.
Jason Long.
What's that?
Jason Long.
Okay, Jason.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Jason, I have a question. Jason, in The Mind Illuminated, you seem to be advocating developing very strong piti before releasing effort, which allows it to calm down into sukha and equanimity. I'm going to go ahead and read a little further before I stop. I seem to have trouble seeing piti as very pleasurable until I release more effort and attempt to let the body's intuition take over, upon which it turns into something that feels more like sukha. Jason, can we just talk a little bit about that first sentence? I don't understand what you mean when you say that I advocate developing very strong piti before releasing effort. Could you help me with
Yeah. So in stage 6 and 7, I believe, you talk about the the joy and energetic sensations like building up and becoming very strong. I think, and then until in stage 8, I guess in stage 7 and 8, you're releasing effort, and at that point, my thought was that the starts to turn into more of the emotional joy rather than the physical pleasure.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if you can increase your volume.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. Yeah, in stage 6 and 7, it seemed like you were advocating that the PT and physical pleasure gains a lot of momentum, right? And then at that point, in stage 7 and 8, you're starting to release effort, and then that release of effort seems like it is what allows it to turn into the more emotional component of sutra, where it turns from physical to the actual meditative joy, right? So I feel like when I'm trying to gain exclusivity, that joy or the pleasurable aspect of the PT. I mean, I will feel like the vibratory aspect, but it doesn't become very pleasurable until I start letting it feel like it's kind of happening on its own more and starting to release effort more gradually, and that's what allows it to get that moment.
Yeah, let's stop there, because I assume that the manifestation of PT that you're referring to is movements and sensations of strange bodily sensations.
Yeah, like energetic sensations, but not necessarily very pleasurable yet.
Okay, well, first of all, except for the admonition to look for the joy and to try to make your meditation as pleasurable as possible, I don't encourage you to do anything to develop PT. PT develops by itself in association with the unification of mind. Now, it does happen for some people that PT begins to develop at earlier stages, but for most people, PT, there may be some early signs of it in stage 7 and some strange sensations, but for most people, strong PT doesn't develop until stage 8 after effortlessness has been achieved. So perhaps in your instance, you're one of those people that may be experiencing strong PT earlier than that. And what I'd like you to do, if you're experiencing these movements and so forth, is just as much as possible, let them be. If you find that you have the same goal of developing exclusive attention and powerful introspective awareness, but what I'd ask you to do is, if you find that focusing very closely on the meditation object is making the PT more severe, that you just back off a little bit. Now, it sounds like another problem may be that there's a little bit too much striving. You speak of effort, and you should be trying to be as relaxed as you can. You say that when you are more relaxed, it gets better. So, your body and your mind are already telling you what you need to do. They're already giving you the advice. They're saying, take a more relaxed approach to this. Focus your efforts and your intention. I mean, your primary effort should be to maintain the intention to have your attention be exclusive, and to have strong metacognitive introspective awareness. But having formulated those intentions, you don't put more effort into it. It's like you make the intention to walk through the door and go pour yourself a cup of tea. You formulated the intention, then you just let it act out. If you get distracted and start to do something else, say you see something and you think, oh, I should put that away, well, then what you do is refresh your intention and you say, well, no, I intended to go and get a cup of tea. But there shouldn't be any more effort in the intentionality than that. It does require what it requires that seems most effortful is maintaining that vigilance, that, just simply being watchful. You will naturally, because you're holding the intention, to make corrections if your attention begins to move. So you already have that intention, and if you find that it weakens, well, you can just remind yourself that you're planning to go get a cup of tea. But it's very gentle, it's soft, and it's very natural. And that should allow the PT to be able to just leave the PT in the background.
I think maybe I should clarify a little bit. I guess when I say PT, it's not that I have uncomfortable physical sensations, or I'm referring to it more in the sense of the momentum of the intention, right? Like the interest in the object that is being built over time by like the sustained, attention that's building up. So I'm seeing it as like a good thing that's like building momentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of buildup of intention and energy is,
Yes.
it becomes stronger, right? And that's good, but it's not really taking on and as I let go of my effort gradually and kind of give the responsibility to the PT to drive the attention to the object rather than, my egoic attention, it seems to become more pleasurable, right? So is that kind of gradual process of handing over the responsibility to do that, how you make the transition to effortlessness? Or would you say that you are building up the attention so it's completely solid using egoic effort and then just dropping it?
What it is the real effort is just to fulfill the intention to have exclusive attention and strong metacognitive introspective awareness. And so, as you're basically doing the right thing. If you, to the degree that you catch yourself forcing and pushing, trying too hard, taking the fun out of it, making it unenjoyable, that's a message to just relax and back off. So you're doing exactly the right thing. Now, really, what is going to happen during stage 7 is that just essentially, whether you think of it as your brain rewiring or if you think of it as your mind system training itself, there is going to be what we describe as a unification of mind until there are enough of your subminds, unconscious subminds, unified around the idea of maintaining exclusive attention and introspective awareness, that you find that you can just let go of effort entirely. But yes, all the way along, you're trying not to be, even from before this stage, trying not to over effort and not to strive, be more of a relaxed state. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to have a look at it, see if there's any more to it. But, you let the body's intuition take over. Feels more like sukha. Yeah, that's good. That's right on. I think I've answered your whole question here. Do you feel like that?
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Yes.
Could I just add something to what Paul shared with me that was helpful to me?
Sure.
So on a recent retreat, I was working with one of our our colleague in the teacher training, and he gave me a suggestion that when the mind is steady and there are not very many mental objects around, if you just sort of bring up the notion of releasing effort into the mind, and then if the response is more pleasure and more ease, that's your indication that you're ready to kind of go with it for a bit, at least until it destabilizes again. And I found that to be sort of a useful way to just kind of keep testing. Like, am I ready to release effort? And there would be that pleasure response just to the thought of it. And usually I could succeed at least in dropping effort for some time while just, being aware that it might not last. So.
Yeah, I definitely find like I tend to over effort, so I need to, remind myself to be dropping effort most of the time. And it does usually end up, providing more joy, but you do have to watch out for, falling into dullness, of course. So,
Okay, let's go on to David's question. David asks, could you talk about your integration of the jhanas to the Sangha's 9 mental abidings and TMI? Do you understand TMI as an original integration of Mahayana, Yogacara, and Theravada models of shamatha practice, in addition to integrating insight practices as well? Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is an original integration for sure. If so, was integration based mainly on your own meditative experience, or were there precedents in the tradition that you made use of? Well, the major precedent was that the tradition that I come from, my teachers were students of Namgyal. I had some contact with Namgyal Rinpoche, but not that much, but he was sort of my root teacher. And the thing about Namgyal is he took practices from every tradition that you can think of. I don't just mean Buddhist tradition. I mean any tradition was, and he liked to introduce people to them and have them try them out. And the main thing that characterizes people who have studied under Namgyal or Namgyal students is that we're very eclectic. We don't, we're not Theravada centric. We're not Tibetan centric. We're not Zen centric or anything like that. We tend to be very open to looking at what all of these traditions have to offer, and to utilize that in a very pragmatic way. What works best? What has one tradition discovered that can be combined with something from another tradition, and the net result is a better result or a quicker realization. So that is the precedent. The reason there aren't much in the way of traditional precedents to this is because these are all traditions that have been, until 100, 150 years ago, very few people ever traveled more than 50 miles from where they lived. So if they were Buddhists, the only tradition they knew was the local neighborhood tradition. And so that's why there really isn't much precedent for this until modern time. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Boris. Is Boris here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Boris.
Hi, Boris. Yeah. Okay. Boris asks, according to your instructions for stage 7, we should practice experiencing the whole body with the breath only as needed for the beginning of this stage to achieve exclusive attention, and then try experiencing effortlessness with the sensations of the nose. As I'm navigating between stages 6 and 7 techniques, I find it natural to drop effort when doing the whole body with the breath and stay with these sensations for a while. Are the sensations in the body a valid meditation object for practicing effortlessness, at least for a part of the session? Yes, absolutely. It's if you can get into effortlessness. I'm going to go back to an earlier sentence. As you said, the beginning of stage to achieve exclusive attention, and then try experiencing effortlessness. Well, there's a piece in between there that I think you probably know about, but I'm going to point out anyway. You might start off your session doing the whole body practice, and this gets you settled into very good exclusive attention and strong awareness. Then you go to focusing the attention on the nose and seeing if you, and not seeing it, but maintaining that same exclusive attention and high level of awareness, high level of mindfulness with the sensations of the breath on the nose. And then when you think it's appropriate, you try letting go of effort and you see what happens. You see. So that's the part that you left out there, was between the, you seem to be saying that you can achieve exclusive attention and effortlessness in while doing the body, whole body breath practice. Is that what you're saying, that you can achieve effortlessness with a whole body breath practice?
Because sometimes I'm switching from the body to the nose. I have some, I feel that I have exclusiveness, so I return to the nose, and then the exclusiveness may fade, so I come back to the body. So I'm switching back and forth.
Okay.
And suddenly, sometimes effortlessness just comes in when I'm on body. I don't say, effortlessness, stop, we are not at the nose now, so let's not. So it catches me, effortlessness sometimes catches me when I'm with the body, and I feel it's natural just to let go of this effort and to feel my body, my subtle sensations on the body without any effort, and to feel this, to sink into it.
Well,
and I wonder if I can allow to myself doing
that's fine and good. If you can get the experience of effortlessness using the whole breath body, a whole body breath practice. But remember what you're after. If you look at stage 8, the practice is there. In stage 8, you're using your attention in all kinds of different ways. And it has to be effortless for you to use it in the ways that those practices demand in stage 8. So what you're trying to achieve in stage 7 is a kind of effortlessness that doesn't depend on being in a particular mode of practice, like experiencing the whole body with the breath. So what you want to do is, sure, use the whole body with the breath as a way to get there. But the important thing is to go back to the nose and keep working there until you get to the place where you can let go of the effort, and that stage means effortless. Then you'll find when you go to stage 8, you can do those practices. But to be able to be effortless, but in only one context, is not going to. You're going to be quite limited in what you can do.
I know that ultimately I should do it within the nostrils. But if I feel it on this stage of the body, my question is if I can spend some time knowing that I ultimately should do it within the nose, may I spend some time effortlessly within the body, with the body?
Yeah. And
is it helpful? Is it contribute to the goal?
It's helpful up to a point, as long as you don't get hooked on doing it that way. And you do want to get to the point where you're starting out with the nose, and you don't need, as you get better and better at achieving effortlessness without the whole body breath, then you're going to let it fall away.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Evgeny? Evgeny? Sorry, I'm not good at names. Evgeny, are you here? That's too bad. Okay. That would be a very interesting question that we might get back to later on. Adrian. Okay, Adrian says...
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hey, Adrian.
Okay, Adrian says, it would be nice if you could comment on samatha, insight, and their relation with path attainment. I've heard that realizing fourth path may take years for people that are in third path, but some people become spontaneously awakened. I understand this is full enlightenment, fourth path. I also imagine that there is a process of maturation after the key realization, spreading it through the mind. And also that people at stages 7, 8, 9, and 10 start to have insight, which is what makes you enter the paths. Shouldn't someone at stage 10 easily be able to have as much insight as he wants, and therefore achieving paths easily? Well, to answer the final question there is absolutely. If someone hasn't already achieved insight and perhaps first path or more by the time they reach stage 10, it should follow quite easily and quite quickly. It usually does. You asked me to comment on samatha, insight, and the relationship with path attainment. Yeah. Excuse the movement of the computer. I have it on my knee, so I have to readjust every now and then. Okay. Well, one of the things about the method that I teach is that we're just basically developing your mental faculties, the mental faculties that are necessary for realizing insight, for awakening, and you use those same faculties on the paths from stream entry to arhat to further deepen and allow those insights to mature. That's really what those paths are about. Is expanding those insights. So the method that I teach develops the mental faculties that are necessary to do that. Whereas there are a lot of practices that don't. They develop a much more limited repertoire of mental faculties, or they use what I refer to as hacks to arrive at an ability to do something, like without ever having really developed stability of attention, to for a relatively short period of time be able to experience kanika samadhi, a momentary attention. Properly speaking, momentary attention is something that comes naturally after you've developed powerful stability of attention. But there are hacks you can use to get to a place where you can have access to momentary attention without having developed samatha. When you get into the paths, and particularly the transition from second path onward, if you haven't developed a full set of tools and faculties, you're going to be impaired and hampered, and it's going to take quite a long time. The one thing that is most undeveloped in most methods, and I think it's simply as a result of the failure, I shouldn't call it failure, it's not really a failure, just the fact that the recognition of attention and awareness as two distinct things, and understanding that what I call peripheral awareness, and particularly what I call metacognitive introspective awareness, is what the Buddha was referring to as sati. And in the Eightfold Path, you have to have both sama samadhi and samasati. And so there are a lot of people who are arriving at first or second path by methods where they haven't developed either sama samadhi or samasati to the degree that the Buddha prescribed. And this, of course, is going to put them at a great disadvantage, and it's going to take a lot longer for them to realize the higher paths. I won't mention any specific things, but there's one very, very well-known tradition in which it's often commented on the fact that people rarely are able to get past second path. And it's for exactly that reason, that they haven't developed these faculties. And that's the advantage of samatha vipassana, is that you are developing those faculties and you are applying those faculties. You're learning to use them all the way along. And so when it comes to achieving the higher paths, you can progress much more quickly and much more easily because you have a mind that's fully developed in this regard, and you have tools to work with. You mentioned that, some people become spontaneously awakened. I understand this is full enlightenment, fourth path. I also imagine that there is a process of maturation after the key. Well, let's just skip that last part. You know, there are stories of people that have become spontaneously awakened, but I question whether any of them have achieved fourth path. It's usually more of an awakening to stream entry. There is an account, you've probably come across it, of a woman who had never done any kind of formal practice before, but who achieved awakening while stepping on a bus in Paris. And I can't remember what happened to her, but she was not able to cope with life at all after that. And she didn't live very long. I can't remember whether she actually committed suicide. I don't remember what happened to her in the end. But that's the only account that I've really seen people suggest that what she may have achieved was the fourth path without really any kind of developmental process up to that. And I don't even know whether that's true or not. I mean, that story has been around for years, may even be apocryphal. But it's most definitely the case that people do spontaneously awaken to stream entry. And I would hold out the possibility that there may be cases of people that spontaneously awaken to second path. That's not a big stretch. It's a stretch, but it's not a huge one. The people spontaneously awakening to first path, I've encountered a couple and I've heard about more. And so I think that may be a reality. So, Adrian, I want to ask you if there are any aspects of your question I haven't addressed, or that I missed the point of what you were trying to find out.
No, thank you. It's what I wanted. I just wanted some clarifications on what to expect if I get to those places.
Yeah. I was just curious how many of you have heard the story of the woman who spontaneously became awakened while getting on a bus in Paris. It's been around for so long, I would have expected half of you at least to have heard it. Yeah, quite a few people have.
There's a book called Collision with the Infinite.
Oh, yeah. Nick just told us there's a book called Collision with the Infinite.
Someone in the chat suggested.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Suzanne Siegel. Yeah. Yeah.
How could the woman commit suicide if she achieved arhanship? Isn't that supposed to relieve her from suffering?
Yes.
A brain tumor, actually.
Oh, she died of a brain tumor. Well, you know, now that first of all, I agree with what you said, that she had it may, you know, you're familiar with Stroke of Insight. What's that woman's name?
TED Talk, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. What? Yeah, Jill Bolte Taylor. That's right. I think of Jill Bolte Taylor's stroke, and I think about Susan Siegel's brain tumor. And, you know, I think maybe in that case, there's a possibility that she didn't achieve awakening in the kind of traditional sense, but perhaps that brain tumor was already having an effect. I don't know. None of us will ever know. With this additional information, I just qualify what I already said by saying, as far as I know, nobody's ever spontaneously awakened to an arhat shit.
Okay.
I think that's the direction I'd go with that. Nick, grab a vac. Hi, Nick. So Nick says, what are the specific formal and informal practices you would recommend for someone who has already attained second path and is ready to work towards third path? And what are the key signposts along the way that indicate progress is being made in the right direction? Well, this is a very good question, very interesting question. Somebody who's on second path, the nature of that path is the recognition of the pervasiveness of self-clinging and craving, even at very subtle levels. And part of that is recognition that craving itself is pleasant and has a particular attraction associated with it. In terms of formal and informal practices, actually, if by informal practices we would mean practicing off the cushion in daily life, formal practices are important at this stage, but the informal practices are extremely important. Basically, a person, what's happened to them is they've had this recognition, this realization that that there is a remnant of self-clinging and that there is ongoing craving. This is at the sort of the culmination of first path, is this realization that self-clinging and craving are still present, that have always been present. There's this kind of shocking and painful realization that almost everything they've ever said, done, thought, or whatever was arising out of some degree of self-clinging and craving, and that there were subtle forms of craving that they were pursuing, even as a stream entrant, that they were continuously pursuing because they weren't recognizing this. And so it's this recognition. What it is it's a sort of an incremental leap into a deeper understanding of no self and suffering. It's really a deep insight into the first two, or I guess you could say the first three noble truths. The person who is reaching the culmination of first path has this realization that of what the true enemy is of any kind of real satisfaction, any kind of real freedom, any kind of real liberation. And it is that insight that brings about the tradition or the transition, the second path. Because now, by recognizing the enemy, remember the Buddha saying, Mara, I see you, I know what you do, and I will defeat you. This is really a very good description of the mindset of a person who has made the transition to second path. The power of craving over them has been greatly diminished by this incremental deepening of insight into suffering and self-clinging. And so typically what tends to happen is that the person in the second path becomes very busy with recognizing what the form it will take will depend sort of on which they became most aware of, whether it was the self-clinging they became most aware of, or whether it was the craving that they became most aware of. They'll become aware of both. But whichever it was that was sort of the breakthrough or gateway insight for the transition from first to second path, they are going to go into this ongoing pursuit of recognition of self-clinging and craving wherever and whenever it arises, and recognizing it in subtler and subtler forms, and learning to use all of the insight that they have, all of the insight power they have, to overcome that self-clinging and that craving. And that's why the culmination of second path is freedom from craving for things of the sense realm and the clinging to the ego self. And we're still left with this inherent sense of being a separate self that is very, very deeply embedded in the brain. But self-clinging, at least in terms of the ego self, will come to an end at the end of second path. So what the formal practice does is it constantly reinforces this. You're practicing in the same way. You're using all of the techniques that you have to observe the arising of craving and self-clinging in its most subtle forms. Your formal practice is where you refine that, and your informal practice in daily life is where you apply that. And so specific formal practice, I think one that I would highly recommend is the meditation on the mind. It's a Mahamudra-like meditation, but where you're in the Mahamudra state and you intentionally allow various mental formations to arise. Now, what would you expect to arise in you're meditating in that state? And of all the possible things that various unconscious subminds have that they might project into consciousness when you give permission for these things to arise, what kinds of things would you expect to be most likely to arise? Things
subtle things related to the sense of self.
Exactly.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get to practice sitting on the cushion, and that's why I really like the meditation on the mind for this, because you get to see the ones that are that are, I guess, ready to make an appearance, and then you can get up off the cushion and you can apply this in real life situations that trigger the arising of them.
That's super helpful. Thank you. That's very clear how that laid out. I just had a couple of things, if I may, just at the end to ask for clarification. So my understanding of the 10 fetter approach was that that in second path, the culmination of first path, so then your second path, that doesn't actually result in additional fetters being broken. It's more a dramatic attenuation in craving for sense pleasures. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, and then the transition from second to third is where those fetters are broken.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Are there any particular, I know that that we need to be careful about reading too much into achieving particular states. But are there particular signposts along the way as someone is working towards that transition from second to third path that indicate that things are moving in the right direction in terms of, I guess, their relationship to craving, but also just sensory perception-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Anything that stands out?
Yes, the main thing that stands out in first path is a growing dissatisfaction Like initially with third path, it's like, wow, this is wonderful. This is so much better than, But then there's this growing dissatisfaction, this feeling that that this is not good enough, and the recognition that there is still suffering there, the recognition that there's still the causes of suffering there, and if you have students who are on first path. There's a practice, very powerful practice. It's what Vivekananda gave to me. He said, I want you to watch your mental states. You might recognize that as the third of the 4 applications of mindfulness. He said, I want you to focus entirely on your mental states as they change and shift from moment to moment. And that gave rise to this realization that it was so crystal clear that it took an effort not to speak it out loud in the meditation hall. There was the recognition that the only truly satisfactory mental states I've ever experienced in my life are the ones that are free from craving.
And is there anything like that for second that you can point to? Or?
Well, it's the one that I already gave you, doing meditation on the mind and watching what arises. So.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Kevin Hing. Is Kevin with us? Oh, hi, Kevin. It's great.
Good, because I wanted to hear that answer too.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey there. Let me preface it too. I'm relatively new to the Dharma, and I'm in the process of learning skillfulness. And I don't know if I adequately expressed my question. Really, the gist of my question is I'm trying to learn how to gain confidence in my own exploration of the Dharma, right? I mean, I really love TMI. It's practice-based, but there's the other aspect. It's learning, reading the Dharma, virtue, Shila, Stila, all of this. There's so many different disciplines and so many different traditions and so many different views. Yeah. And what I love about what you do is you unify things and you bring them together, but still as a lonely practitioner in Tampa, Florida, you have to learn how to discern this stuff on your own, and I'm really struggling with what to take, what to let go of, and have a confidence in myself of, okay, I really resonate with what Culadasa says about rebirth, but Hanasaro, for example, is really emphatic about this view. What can I safely take from what he's saying? What can I safely let go if I don't have the comfort of Culadasa on my shoulder telling me every answer to every question? Do you see what I'm getting?
I know, yeah. And I actually got that when I read the question. Thanissaro and I have had a rather strange ongoing relationship for many years. Anyway, we'll just read your question for the sake of everyone. Maybe everyone has these questions in front of them. I don't know. But you're asking, can I provide further explanation, clarification that would help me to understand, reconcile the apparent contrary views asserted by teachers like Thanissaro Bhikkhu, who strongly asserts that the fear induced by belief in multi-life rebirth is necessary for an effective practice of right view, virtue, etc., and that only when you appreciate the potential for even the most natural or innocuous-seeming attachment to lead to long-term suffering will you be willing to take it seriously and work to abandon it. And only then will you really be following the path. So, okay, I'm going to read on. I'll read the whole question here. I find myself unable to reconcile except belief in multi-life rebirth due to the fledgling insights of anatta that I have already experienced. Good for you. Yes. Yeah. Yet Thanisaro's view causes me to doubt whether my well-intentioned practice of renunciation is truly adequate. Okay, so his teaching makes you feel like, well, maybe if I'm not afraid of being reborn as a frog or in hell realm or something like that, I won't really practice hard enough to succeed, right?
Well, you know, I guess what I'm saying is I think I'm serious enough. I think I'm diligent enough. But then he comes along and like, well, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah.
You know,
Can a dedicated practitioner safely reconcile Thanissaro's orthodox view of rebirth as an example of skillful means? You know, does that sound reasonable to you? Are we all so lacking in, I don't know what the word is, that we have to be lied to and tricked in order to have sufficient motivation to achieve awakening? Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable?
Well, I guess my follow-up too is I was further, maybe it was after I posted the question, I found his article on no self.
Yes.
And in that article, which was fairly lengthy, he does acknowledge, it seems, that you can, he in that, for no self, he seems to talk about having skillful use of anatta, where you start with a very broad sense and then you eventually work your way, gradually letting go of the sense of self until you can fully achieve the full abandonment of no self. But I don't know whether he's also saying you could do that with rebirth as well. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he on no self, he seems to be saying start with a kindergarten view of believe in the self enough, you can get into the practice, gradually start letting go of your sense of no self until you can let go of it entirely.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? So maybe, that's why I say skillful, is he being, I think I know where you're coming from, but I guess, again, I'm trying to get a sense of what can I safely, you know, I don't want to throw away something of some other perspective, some other discipline is sympathetically saying, I want to learn how to extract from that the value, but still go with what you say, which resonates with me. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I've been trying to understand for years what's going on in Thanissaro's mind. He wrote a little book called, I think the title is just Rebirth, something like that. And I believe it's 7 chapters long. The first 3 chapters are all excerpts from the suttas that seem to be saying that the Buddha was teaching reincarnation. The next 3 chapters are all explaining how this is impossible and unreasonable. The final chapter, the 7th chapter, is a rationalization. And when anatta, he insists that anatta means not self, but I think, at least in one conversation, I got him to agree with the statement that if absolutely everything was not self, there was no self. But I'm not sure, because he immediately went on. Now, a lot of his students are Chinese and in Southern California, and which is, by the way, how I got to know him and be in contact with him. And some of them will say, well, I wouldn't go to all this trouble to practice the Dharma if I didn't believe in reincarnation. They usually say, my childhood was so horrible, with my parents driving me all the time, and my older brother was the favorite, and I was always abused, and blah, 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 and that I'll do anything to keep from being reborn and going through that again. So I can't buy his rationalization. I read it and think, somehow this man knows that this isn't true, but I don't understand him. I quite honestly do not understand him. The students that we share have tried many times to arrange for a discussion or a debate between myself and Thanissaro. He's always refused. So
That is down. It almost sounds like he's admitting that this is just skillful means when he says that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's basically his claim, is that it's skillful means. But I have a huge problem with this. I have a gigantic problem with this. If you believe in reincarnation, as a matter of fact, one of my theories is that this may apply to him, because he's super orthodox. He's super orthodox in every way. If this is what the tradition teaches, it has to be true. And this is, my mind's just going blank. I hate it when that happens.
You're saying you had a huge problem with this super orthodox tradition says it has to be true.
Yeah, it's not getting to the key or whatnot. Yes, okay, yes. My huge problem with what he teaches is that the more strongly you believe in reincarnation, the harder it is for you to achieve stream entry, because you have to give up the belief. You have to realize anatta as no self, not as some kind of self that's, out of sight, hard to reach, hard to see, hard to know about. You have to recognize that I am impermanent in the sense that I am a process, that everything is interconnected, that I am just a part of a larger process. You have to recognize that even seeing myself as a process that's part of a larger process is an illusion generated by my mind, because I'm not. It's like looking at a part of the river and saying that current there is separate from the rest of the river. In a sense, it's true, but it's not really true. I mean, our personhood is real, but our selfhood is not. So it's very difficult for somebody to achieve stream entry if they are absolutely convinced in reincarnation and that there is some single, abiding, and separate self. It's a huge obstacle. Now, this has raised the question in my mind. Has Thanissaro achieved stream entry himself? If not, then he's just teaching the standard doctrine. That's all. He's doing his job. He's upholding the tradition. And he's teaching what's always so. The other possibility is that he has achieved stream entry. And I've seen this happen in other people, so I can see it happening. He's achieved stream entry, but following stream entry, he's faced with the paradox of the Buddha says, according to his tradition, that reincarnation is real and is a problem. And he still experiences that inherent sense of being a separate self that doesn't go away until you become an arhat. So he has to rationalize that. Now, people rationalize that in a lot of ways. The most common way is they seize on consciousness, because consciousness is sort of amorphous and ephemeral and everything else. It is pretty easy to mold it into, consciousness. Consciousness is that true self. I mean, after all, if you say, what am I? Well, all I am is a string of moments of consciousness. So it's an easy story to buy in. But if you're familiar with the sutta where Sati, the fisherman's son, started teaching people that it was consciousness that was reborn, well, the Buddha just chewed him to pieces on that. And the Buddha, and even in the Anattalankana Sutra, the sutra on anatta, on no self, even there he specifically says there is no self. That consciousness consists of moments in which consciousness arises together with its object, and there is no self in that. The other path that people take is they say, okay, the Buddha made it clear that it's not consciousness, but mind. Now, mind is something else, okay? And so, like the Tibetans invented the mind stream. It's the mind stream. That's what goes on, So I've seen before people come into a place where because of their prior beliefs and commitment to those beliefs, and because they still have this sense of being separate, that they strive very hard to find some way to reconcile these. And one other theory that I have, which I could talk to him about if you'd ever let me, is that Thanissaro is truly extreme infinite, but feels like he can't betray his tradition by denouncing reincarnation. Now, as far as I'm concerned, what the Buddha meant by rebirth is rebirth of the self as a mental fabrication. Yeah, the self as a mental fabrication is constantly being reborn. And in each new child that's born, they go through a change, and when is it, by the time they're about 2 years old, that they have a well-developed construct of self. That self has been reborn in this new child. This is the rebirth that the Buddha is talking about. And this is the birth that ends. This is the birth that ends. So anyway, that's my thoughts on those things. And
Thank you.
as usual, I've been going on and got lots of wonderful questions and not much time. But is Philip here? Philip Yavanowski. Seems not. Toby. Is Toby here? Seems not. Michael Walsh. Okay, he's here. Hey. What role does the Dharma awakening play in treating psychiatric conditions that are commonly believed to be more biologic in nature, like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia? Can awakening cure such disorders? How would such an individual progress through the 10 stages and the paths of awakening? What precautions should an individual take? The traditional texts do not seem to mention things that could match up to bipolar or schizophrenia, or patterns of behavior that correlate with our modern understanding of mental illness. You're absolutely right about that last statement. They don't seem to address that at all. They seem to ignore it entirely. Maybe everyone was more mentally healthy in those days. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, though. In my own experience, though, I had one student with schizophrenia, and she attended quite a few retreats with me, and she would often call me up and we'd talk on the phone. And through meditation, she was able to reach a place where she heard the voices, she heard what they're saying, but she no longer believed that they were anything but a disordered part of her mind, and she didn't believe what they were saying. These voices would tell her that she was bad, that she deserved to die. These voices would tell her that they were going to kill her, or that she should kill herself, and things like that. And she got to a place, and she told me her psychiatrist was really very, very happy with when she got to a place where she could just accept those voices for what they were, an aspect of her illness. I also had a number of people with bipolar disorder as students, still do. And the biggest problem with them is that they always want to cut back on their medications or quit their medications because it interferes with their meditation. But I won't continue to be in the role of teacher for them or let them attend a retreat unless they absolutely promise not to modify their medications. What I find is it does help them deal with it somewhat. Now, I come from a family where everybody was bipolar, and I was myself. That disappeared quite a long time ago. I mean, it would be really tempting to say that, I was quite mildly bipolar. My sister and my mother much more severely so. But I was mildly bipolar, but it disappeared. And it would be really tempting to say, oh, it was because of my meditation practice that it disappeared. But it is a fact that bipolar disorder diminishes and often disappears around middle age or shortly after in many people. Not always, but often. And so I won't make that claim. The most I will say is that meditation does help people with these kinds of biological, psychiatric problems. It can definitely help them. Certainly not a cure for such disorders by any means. And there are certain dangers. Well, I was married once before to a woman, and she had a schizophrenic breakdown, and she read messages in street signs and license plates, and she asked our 4-year-old son, made him responsible for making all important life decisions and things like that. And she became severely schizophrenic as a result of doing Tibetan tantric practices. And, there are some practices that would be extremely dangerous for somebody who has schizophrenia. Now, the thing is that you often don't know that somebody is a schizophrenic waiting for something to trigger their initial psychotic episode, which will then set them on the path. And this is certainly not obvious with Sharon, but it was doing the tantric practices. And if you're familiar at all with tantric practices, you can probably understand why. It led her to a total schizophrenic breakdown from which she never recovered to this day. So, and a more general thing that I would say is everybody has neurosis. Everybody has some degree of mental disorder. As a matter of fact, seeing the world the way that our conventional reality sees the world is itself a mental disorder. And insight and awakening are the cure for that particular mental disorder. But everyone has all kinds of neurosis. They have had emotional and psychological trauma, etc. In the method that I teach, I make dealing with that an important part of it. Most methods and most teachers will encourage people to overlook or bury or avoid or whatever these things when they come up. And instead, the method that I describe in TMI, I call it purification, and it has to happen. Interesting thing is, if any of you are familiar with Ken Wilber, is his recent thing is to say that awakening is not enough. In addition to waking up, there needs to be cleaning up, which is cleaning up all of your neuroses. And then there is growing up. And what he means by growing up is basically moving from a place of being egocentric, developing compassion for, and a broader and broader circle, compassion for family, compassion for love and compassion for your ethnic group, ultimately love and compassion for your species, or for all species, for the planet Earth, for everything. And I think Ken Wilber is right. Waking up is only 1/3 of what we need to do. We need to clean up and we need to grow up. TMI makes a stab at bringing the cleaning up part into the picture. So that's about as much as I can say about mental illness at this point. There are people who, when they get to the stage of purifications, will come across things that they cannot deal with on their own, and it's very appropriate for them to seek out therapy to help them. One of the so-called dark night, this phenomenon of people whose lives become totally disrupted, and the dark night is pathological. It's not the same thing as the deepened or the knowledge of the suffering. This is a result of people reaching insight without having dealt with any of their neurosis. All of that neurosis, well, not all of it, a lot of that neurosis comes to the surface, and then they have to deal with it, and then they enter into a dark night kind of experience. And I'll go beyond that and say that even at the higher paths and the highest levels of awakening, these can be achieved without having completed the process of cleaning up. There are certain kinds of things which can be hidden, which the Dharma itself provides a perfect hiding place for certain kinds of neuroses. And these are blind spots that people can have. I've experienced that myself. I look at a lot of revered teachers who have done things that you can only describe as outrageous, and think that the same thing is true of them, that in spite of the degree of awakening they have, there are parts of their psyche that are severely disordered, that are hiding out under some aspect of the Dharma, and are guiding their behaviors in ways that are unhealthy and unwholesome. So.
What are the blind spots that the Dharma hides?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What are those blind spots that you said that the Dharma hides?
Okay, yeah, I can tell you one of them. What I discovered about myself, I listened to, I think it was a TED Talk by Gabor Mate. It was called When the Body Says No. And as a part of that TED Talk, he read a collection of obituaries that he had clipped out of the Toronto Globe and Mail. And every one of them described me. They were all people who had died of cancer, and they described me perfectly. And this caught my attention in a very strong way. And so I decided to work with a therapist on this. And what we came in touch with was an aspect of my personality. I had an extremely difficult child. An aspect of my personality that had been manifesting as the belief that my well-being was not as important as other people's needs. And one of my favorite philosophers, Willie Nelson, in his birthday album from last year, God's Problem Child, there's a song, I woke up still not dead again today. And one of the lines in there is they say my pace would kill a normal man, but then I've never been accused of being normal anyway. And that describes me. I work, I've given classes from hospital beds. I've come out of major abdominal surgery performed on Tuesday, went home on Thursday, and was at work Friday morning. I have been this way for many, many years. And I teach people that true compassion doesn't mean throwing yourself under the bus for somebody else's sake. I teach people that the proper attitude of a bodhisattva is they see themselves in the same way that they see everyone else. that it's like a mother sees all of their children as equal and would not do something harmful to one child for the sake of another. But here I have been for years, pushing myself, always pushing myself, doing more. Somebody has a need. Will you do this? Can you help me? And the Dharma is a perfect cover for that. Hey, you know, I'm just living the Dharma, right? Perfect cover for that. Well, it turns out that part of me from my childhood is trying to kill me because of me doing that. And that's probably, well, possibly the reason that I have cancer, the reason that I had neurological Lyme disease before that. And prior to that, I had a diagnosis of ALS. And I wouldn't put it past possibility that the ALS diagnosis was actually was accurate until something inside me changed it into something treatable. So now my challenge is to survive cancer. But yeah, this is how something can hide under the Dharma. Now, this is I mean, people speak in admiration of me doing the things I'm doing. And that reinforces it and makes it easier for me to keep harming myself by trying to do too much, right? You'd have to come up with a different explanation for what Sasaki Roshi did. But, you know, and but I could see that being due to the same thing, to some part of himself that, you know, I mean, I've never been able to decide. Was Sasaki Roshi just, you know, really good at talking the talk, but hadn't really realized any degree of compassion? Or did he really have such a big blind spot? Did he really believe it when he said the only reason I touched those female students was to help them break down their inner barriers and open up? You know, I can't decide. I don't know. And why should I? What right do I have to decide about Sasaki Roshi? But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of what we see with teachers is major blind spots that that certain aspects of the Dharma can hide, can disguise. You know?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's enough for today. And we might do another catch-up or something with the other questions. I don't know. We'll see. I enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. You'll notice I'm being a little more outspoken about things that I would, in the past, have been a little, I would have soft-pedaled more. But, hey, you know, at my age, you get to do that. So, my apologies to Tanasaro. Didn't mean to insult you, but just speaking from the heart. Anyway, thank you all. Really appreciate you. Appreciate your support. Look forward to the next time we talk.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
You too.
Bye, Roger. Bye, thank you.